Tonight, our top stories in Raleigh County, where Natalie Cochran appeared in court to be arraigned for the first-degree murder of her late husband. She's accused of poisoning him.
We have a new update in the Natalie Cochran case as she appeared in court for a post-trial hearing. Cochran and her counsel had submitted several motions for judgment of acquittal in a new trial. Her defense team argues the jury was swayed by public opinion and the trial should be moved to a different county. Her team also said the jury should have been sequestered. Her attorneys also said that the bottle of insulin seized from the Cochran house was irrelevant and should not have been admitted as evidence.
There are two men standing in a kitchen in Daniels, West Virginia, looking at a 200-pound man curled under a cabinet on the floor. He won't wake up. One of them kneels down and drives his knuckle hard into the man's sternum, the kind of pressure that would bring most people up screaming. The man on the floor lets out one low sound, and then nothing. Both of them turn to his wife. "We'll drive him, right now. Let's go." She shakes her head. She is calm. She is composed. And she tells them the same thing she has been telling everyone who has walked through that door since midday. He just needs to sleep it off. The two men look at each other. Outside, a car sits running. A hospital is 12 minutes away. The man on the floor has not moved in hours. And the woman standing over him, the woman with the medical degree, the woman this entire community trusted with their health, their money, their children, is asking everyone to leave. What she knows that none of them do yet will take 6 years, 2 exhumations, a federal fraud conviction, and a jury of 12 to finally bring into the open. The question is, how long had she been planning this before he hit the floor? If you've been here before, thank you. You already know what this channel is. For everyone new, this is where we cover the cases that happen inside the one place nobody expects. The home, the marriage, the relationship that was supposed to be safe. If that's the kind of story you need to understand, hit subscribe. We're here every week. Now, back to Daniels, West Virginia, and the woman still standing in that kitchen. Between June 2017 and August 2019, Natalie Cochran ran what federal prosecutors would later describe as one of the largest Ponzi schemes in West Virginia history. Her two companies, Technology Management Solutions and Tactical Solutions Group, had never won a single federal contract, not one. Every claim she had made about her business empire, the DoD partnerships, the $500 million valuation, the multi-million-dollar pipeline, was fabricated. The contracts existed on paper she had forged herself. The federal employees who supposedly signed off on them didn't exist. The hundreds of millions she told investors were sitting in her company accounts were never there. What was real was the money coming in. At least 11 investors handed Natalie Cochran approximately $2.5 million between 2017 and 2019. The list of victims is almost painful to read in full. Her own parents. Her sister, Penny Lowry, who lost around $50,000. Friends from the community. Families from the Youth Baseball League where Natalie also served as treasurer. A private investigator later traced $32,000 vanishing from the league's accounts in a single night, with charges to TJ Maxx and Olive Garden. And then there were Donna and Ed Bolt, Michael's parents. Natalie approached her own mother-in-law with an investment opportunity, and she sealed it with one line. She told Donna that her own mother had already received $60,000 in returns. Donna handed over $245,600. Their retirement savings, the couple's entire financial security, gone. The money funded the Shelby Cobra, paid for in May 2018, with a $37,500 cash withdrawal. It funded diamond earrings, worth more than $14,000, firearms, motorcycles, 3 properties, the vacations in Hawaii and Paris that everyone in Daniels assumed were the natural result of booming defense contracts. One investor, Tony McCall, came close to seeing through it earlier than most. His own husband had died of leukemia, so when Natalie pulled him aside one day, flipped her hair forward to show a patch at the back of her head, and told him she had been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphocytic leukemia, Tony knew. He knew leukemia is not described in stages. He knew what chemotherapy hair loss looks like, and he knew the patch looked shaved. He understood in that moment exactly what Natalie Cochran was. He hadn't yet understood what she was capable of. There was a detail from the early days of Natalie's operation that Tony McCall recalled at trial, one that, in hindsight, said everything. When new employees joined the company, Natalie made them watch a film together as a team exercise. The 2016 movie War Dogs, the story of two young men who talked their way into Pentagon contracts and built a business on lies. At the end of the film, they go to prison. Tony McCall remembered laughing and telling Natalie, with genuine confusion, that those guys went to jail. Natalie just smiled. By late 2018, the structure was beginning to crack. Returns weren't arriving. Investors were comparing notes. One of them had stopped accepting delays and forged emails. He wanted a face-to-face meeting. At a Bank of America branch in Lynchburg, Virginia, he wanted to sit across a table and watch someone open the accounts and show him the money Natalie had been describing for 2 years. The meeting was scheduled for the morning of February 6, 2019. Michael Cochran was supposed to be on the chartered flight. And there is one more thing you need to know before we get to that morning. While Michael was coaching youth baseball and going to work every day, he had started asking questions. Not loudly, not formally, but according to prosecutors, he had grown suspicious about where the money was actually coming from. He was getting close to the answer. Natalie knew it. "I want you to hold something for later." At some point during the days that followed, while Michael lay in a hospital bed, while the family kept vigil outside his room, Natalie Cochran was still working. What she was doing from that hospital, while her husband was on a ventilator 1 floor below her, is one of the coldest documented details of this entire case. We'll get there. On the night of February 5, 2019, Natalie Cochran knew exactly what the next morning meant. A chartered plane was booked. A Bank of America branch in Lynchburg, Virginia had a meeting room reserved, and an investor, who had grown tired of delays and forged documents, was going to sit down across a table and ask to see the accounts. The hundreds of millions Natalie had told everyone were sitting in her company's name. There was nothing in those accounts. There had never been anything. Michael Cochran was scheduled to be on that flight. He never made it to the airport. By the time the sun came up on February 6th, the flight had been canceled. And something had already happened inside that house that would take 6 years, 2 exhumations, and a jury of 12 to fully explain. On February 4th, 2 days before Michael collapsed, Natalie sent a text message to her friend Stephanie Hamilton. Stephanie was a physician's assistant. Natalie was asking her about an injectable steroid. Stephanie offered to come over and administer it herself. Natalie told her no. She said she would handle it. The same day, Natalie filled a prescription for Xanax. Michael Cochran had a documented allergy to benzodiazepines, the class of drug that Xanax belongs to. That allergy was on record. Natalie was his wife. She was a pharmacist. She knew. On February 5th, Natalie visited Dr. Zachary Halsey at Access Health in Daniels. She told him she had flu symptoms. He tested her for influenza. Negative. He tested her for strep. Negative. He sent her home. According to trial testimony, Dr. Halsey also noted that based on his evaluation, he would not have advised her to travel the following morning. That evening, both Natalie and Michael were in the house on 4H Lake Drive. The flight to Lynchburg was set for the morning. By dawn on February 6th, it had been canceled. At 9:30 in the morning, Natalie texted her neighbor Jennifer Davis. She told Jennifer that both she and Michael were unwell. She mentioned that her own blood sugar had spiked. She gave a reading of 280, which is dangerously high, and she asked if Jennifer could spare some of her son's insulin. Jennifer Davis did not hesitate. Her son was a type 1 diabetic. Natalie was the woman the family had trusted with his care for years. Jennifer sent over a vial of Humalog, a fast-acting insulin. Her husband Chris dropped it off at the Cochran home on his way to work. What nobody knew at that moment was what Humalog does to a body that doesn't need it. In a healthy, non-diabetic adult, insulin doesn't regulate blood sugar. It crashes it. And Humalog, the specific formulation Jennifer handed over that morning, begins working in approximately 15 minutes. It peaks within the hour. Around noon, Michael Cochran lost consciousness. He would never wake up. Now, months before this morning, Michael had said something to a close friend. He had told them he thought he was being poisoned. The friend hadn't known what to say. It was one of those conversations that sits in the back of a person's mind without a frame to put around it, until the frame arrives. By the time a jury heard about that conversation in January 2025, the frame had been there for 6 years. A Xanax prescription for a drug her husband was allergic to. A borrowed vial of fast-acting insulin obtained under a false pretense. And a chartered flight canceled on the morning it would have exposed everything. Michael Cochran wasn't paranoid. He was right. Jason Bowen was a contractor who had been doing work at the Cochran property. At 12:21 in the afternoon on February 6th, he received a text from Natalie asking him to come over. When he arrived with his colleague Jonathan Miller, what they found made no sense. Michael Cochran, a former state-level powerlifter, a man neither of them had ever seen anything but upright and present, was curled beneath a kitchen cabinet, completely unresponsive. Miller knelt down and performed a sternum rub, the kind of sharp pressure a paramedic uses to test for consciousness. Michael produced one faint, low sound, then nothing. Both men turned to Natalie and said the same thing. "We'll drive him, right now. Let's go." She told them he just needed to sleep it off. They left. They did not call 911. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Natalie texted Jennifer Davis a photograph of her husband on the floor. In the same message, she reported his blood sugar at 145, a number that sits comfortably within the normal range for a healthy adult. That reading would later be directly contradicted by the hospital's own records. Stephanie Hamilton arrived at the house that afternoon. As a physician's assistant, she understood within moments of seeing Michael that the situation was critical. She pleaded with Natalie to call an ambulance. She named hospitals: Raleigh General, Charleston Area Medical Center, Princeton Community. Natalie refused every one. John Hamilton, Stephanie's husband and a West Virginia state trooper, called the house to check in. He was told the same thing. Michael would sleep it off. Hours passed. Michael's condition made the severity of what was happening impossible to misread. His body was failing in front of everyone in that room. Natalie and her sister Penny attended to him on the floor. And still, no ambulance was called. Multiple people walked through that house on February 6, 2019. A contractor, a physician's assistant, a state trooper by proxy. Not one of them picked up a phone and dialed 911. Some of them would carry that with them long after the trial ended. It was only that evening, when Chris Davis finally arrived, that someone refused to listen. Chris took one look at Michael on that floor and didn't ask Natalie a single question. He picked his best friend up, carried him out of that house, and drove him to Raleigh General Hospital himself. No ambulance, no discussion. He just went. When the emergency room recorded Michael's blood glucose on arrival, the number was 21, not 145, not anywhere close to normal. To understand what the number 21 means, you need a point of reference. A healthy non-diabetic adult has a blood glucose level somewhere between 80 and 100. Below 70 is considered clinically low. Below 54, a person is typically disoriented, unable to function, at serious medical risk. Below 40, the situation becomes life-threatening. Doctors describe readings in that range with words like critical and urgent. Dr. Diane Krieger, an endocrinologist based in Miami, who testified for the prosecution, used a different word for 21. She called it profound. She told the jury that a blood glucose reading that low in a healthy, non-diabetic male with no underlying conditions had, in her expert opinion, only one credible explanation. Someone had given him insulin, a significant amount, enough that even as the hospital administered glucose to bring his levels up, they kept plummeting, as if something was still actively driving them down. That is what a massive dose of Humalog does in a body that produces its own insulin. The body doesn't need more. It can't regulate what's been added. And the glucose the hospital gave Michael to save him was being undermined by insulin that was still working. Michael was intubated. He was given dextrose. In the early hours of February 7th, He was transferred to Charleston Area Medical Center, where doctors confirmed massive cerebral edema, critically low potassium levels, and severe hypoglycemia. The low potassium was significant. It is a known secondary effect of insulin in high doses, and it further supported what Dr. Krieger was describing. Here is the forensic problem the case would spend 4 years trying to solve. Before glucose was administered at Raleigh General, no one ordered a C-peptide test. A C-peptide test is how physicians distinguish between insulin the body produces and insulin introduced from an external source. The body produces C-peptide alongside insulin. A synthetic injection does not. A C-peptide result, taken in those first hours, could have chemically proven that the insulin in Michael Cochran's body came from a vial, not from his own pancreas. Without it, that specific piece of evidence was gone the moment the glucose drip started. Donna Bolt had been a registered nurse for 30 years. She would later testify that if anyone had told her what was happening in that house, she would have called an ambulance herself. No one told her. She did not see a photograph of her son in a hospital bed until close to 10 o'clock that night, when her husband walked into their bedroom and handed her the phone. The following morning, Donna tried to drive to her son's bedside. There are 2 Charleston area medical centers. Natalie sent her to the wrong one. By the time Donna found the right building, hours had been lost. When Donna and Ed finally reached Michael's room, a nurse performed a sternum rub. Michael responded. Faintly, barely, but he responded. His parents began to cry. Donna later told the court that she looked at Natalie's face in that moment, expecting to see what she felt. Relief, hope, something. What she saw was horror. Meanwhile, while Michael Cochran lay on a ventilator 1 floor below her, Natalie Cochran was working. While Michael Cochran lay on a ventilator in a Charleston hospital, his wife was working. She was pitching investors on 49% of a company that had never won a single contract, asking $4.9 million for her share of something that did not exist. She was texting Donna Bolt about a new contract opportunity while Donna's son lay on a ventilator 1 floor below her. And at some point during those days, she pulled Jennifer Davis aside, the woman who had handed over her son's insulin without hesitation, and said something to her. Jennifer Davis would sit with those words for 6 years. She would repeat them in a courtroom in January 2025, in front of a jury of 12 people, and the room would go quiet. What Natalie Cochran asked Jennifer Davis to do while her husband was still breathing is what this case is really about. Jennifer Davis testified that while Michael was hospitalized and on a ventilator, Natalie approached her with a request so specific and so cold that Jennifer said she carried it with her from that hospital until the day she repeated it in front of a jury. Natalie told her she could not bear to see Michael this way, and she asked Jennifer, the woman who had trusted her with her diabetic son's life, to help her end it faster. The jury heard exactly what Natalie asked Jennifer to do. Jennifer told them, and the room went silent. There was something else. State Police Lieutenant Timothy Bledsoe testified that a text message had been sent from Michael Cochran's phone hours after he was already unconscious. Someone else had been composing messages on his behalf. Whose hands were holding that phone, and what those messages said, went before the jury as part of the pattern the state was building. A pattern of control that didn't stop when Michael hit the floor, didn't stop when he was put on a ventilator, and apparently didn't stop until it had no choice. Michael Brandon Cochran died on February 11, 2019. He was 38 years old. The original death certificate listed natural causes. There was no funeral. Per a request Michael had made years earlier, a small private graveside service was held at Sunset Memorial Park in Beckley. Natalie was back to business within days, but the lies were starting to come apart. 3 months after Michael's death, Natalie launched the Coach Michael Cochran Legacy Scholarship. She announced it publicly. She promised 8 local students full ride scholarships, 8 years of schooling, and $7,500 each in personal spending money. She personally told their parents to cancel their student loan applications. She had it covered. The money did not exist. The scholarships did not exist. The families found out that summer. On June 25, 2019, Federal agents executed a search warrant at the house on 4H Lake Drive. Inside the kitchen refrigerator, they found a vial. FBI forensic scientist Earl Gleam later testified about that vial at trial. The rubber stopper had a single puncture defect, a mark that went all the way through, consistent with a needle having been inserted and withdrawn. Neither Michael nor Natalie Cochran were diabetic. The vial's contents were later tested by FBI chemist Joseph Stevens, who confirmed they were consistent with human insulin. Gleam could not say scientifically when the puncture was made. He said what the evidence showed, and he stopped there. On September 24, 2019, a federal grand jury in Beckley returned a sealed 26-count indictment against Natalie Cochran. Wire fraud, bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, money laundering, bankruptcy fraud, false oath in bankruptcy. 2 days later, on September 26th, she was arrested, and Donna and Ed Bolt started asking the question that had been sitting under everything since February. If she had lied about all of it, the contracts, the cancer, the scholarships, the returns, what else had she lied about? In September 2019, Michael Cochran's body was exhumed under a sealed court order. The first pathologist assigned to the case, Dr. Poda Kubicek, found moderate decomposition. He was unable to determine an exact cause of death. He ruled both the cause and the manner of death undetermined. In January 2021, the death certificate was formally amended. Natural causes became a question mark. On March 18, 2021, Natalie Cochran appeared before U.S. District Judge Frank Volk for sentencing on her federal fraud conviction. She had pleaded guilty the previous September to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of unlawful monetary transaction. Judge Volk sentenced her to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison and ordered approximately $2.6 million in restitution. He described what he had read in the case file as one of the most complex and practiced frauds the court had encountered. He also noted on the record that even as her husband lay dying, Natalie had been attempting to continue her fraud in a more robust and purposeful way. A first-degree murder indictment followed in November 2021. It was dismissed without prejudice in April 2023, when prosecutors decided to pursue a second exhumation and additional forensic analysis. By the time Michael's body was examined for the second time, the soft tissue evidence that might have contained traceable insulin was gone. He was skeletal remains. A new pathologist was brought in, Dr. Paul Uribe, a former Armed Forces medical examiner with direct experience in the insulin homicide cases at the Clarksburg Veterans Affairs Medical Center. He reviewed every hospital record, every lab value, every chart from the night Michael was admitted, and every document produced by the first autopsy. In October 2023, he delivered his conclusion. There was no other viable explanation for a blood glucose of 21 in a healthy, non-diabetic man. Someone had given him insulin. The manner of death was homicide. A fresh grand jury agreed. A fresh indictment was returned on October 24, 2023. Natalie Cochran was charged with the first-degree murder of her husband. Jury selection began January 13, 2025, in Raleigh County Circuit Court. Prosecuting attorney Tom Truman, Special Judge H.L. Kirkpatrick presiding. The case the state walked into that courtroom with had no eyewitness, no surviving insulin, and no confession. What it had was a number, a timeline, and a pharmacist who knew exactly what both of them meant. What happened over the next 9 days in that courtroom would answer every question this case had left open, including the ones nobody had thought to ask yet. Tom Truman told the jury to remember 2 numbers. 0, the amount of evidence that Michael Cochran had ever known about his wife's Ponzi scheme, and 21, the blood glucose reading that ended his life. Assistant Prosecutor Ashley Acord put the motive plainly. On the morning of February 6th, Natalie Cochran had 2 choices: come clean or take him out. The witnesses came one after another. Jennifer Davis testified to handing over the insulin. Jason Bowen described finding Michael on the floor and being told to leave. Stephanie Hamilton testified about pleading for a hospital and being refused. Hospital after hospital, until she stopped asking. Chris Davis took the stand and described his best friend through tears. Dr. Diane Krieger told the jury that a blood glucose of 21 in a healthy non-diabetic adult had, in her expert opinion, only one credible explanation. Dr. Paul Uribe agreed. His conclusion was unambiguous: homicide by insulin poisoning. The defense argued that Michael's supplement regimen, which his own children described as filling an entire dinner plate, had put his body under sustained stress. They called their own forensic pathologist, Dr. Lubisa Dragovic, who maintained that the cause of death should remain undetermined, given the state of the remains. Attorney Stanley Selden pressed both expert witnesses hard on what they could not prove with certainty. The defense needed reasonable doubt. The prosecution needed the number 21. Both of Natalie's children testified for her. Her daughter Nicole, now 20 years old, described her father's daily supplement intake. Her son Ashton also took the stand. When Nicole stepped down from the witness box, Natalie looked at her daughter and mouthed 3 words across the courtroom: "I love you." Court observers would later debate what that moment meant, whether it was a mother reaching for her child across an impossible distance, or one final performance, delivered in real time, in front of a jury that was already watching her hands. Natalie Cochran did not take the stand. Closing arguments were delivered on January 29, 2025. The jury, 8 women, 4 men, retired at 9:34 in the morning. At approximately 11:30 in the morning, the jury came back. Less than 2 hours. The foreperson stood and read the verdict aloud. Guilty. First-degree murder. In West Virginia, a first-degree murder conviction does not automatically carry life without parole. The same jury must return the following day for what the law calls a mercy phase, a separate proceeding where they decide whether the defendant will be eligible for parole after 15 years, or whether they will die in prison. It was the second decision this jury would have to make, and it was still open. The mercy phase began the following morning. Natalie's mother, Daphne Jessup, took the stand for the defense. She asked the jury to give her daughter the possibility of coming home. She said her grandchildren needed their mother. She said she and her husband were getting older, and she wasn't sure how many more years they had. She said she might never get to hold her daughter again if the jury didn't show mercy. Nicole Cochran made her own plea. She described the milestones she had missed with her mother: birthdays, graduations, her first car. She said she wanted Natalie there when she got married, when she had children of her own. She was 20 years old, standing in a courtroom, asking 12 strangers to give her back the parent who was still alive. The prosecution asked her directly, "This jury has already found that your mother killed your father. Do you understand that?" Nicole said yes. "You loved your father?" Yes. The question the court did not ask was the one that hung in the air of that room anyway. The same question Loop 6 had left open since the moment Natalie mouthed those 3 words across the courtroom. And it was Donna Bolt who answered it. Not the lawyers. Not the jury. Donna. When the prosecution's victim impact witnesses began to speak, Natalie's family stood up and walked out of the courtroom. They had sat through every word of the defense. They could not sit through what came next. Donna Bolt read 8 pages. She told the court that Natalie Cochran and her family had never once said they were sorry. She said she and Ed had watched in that courtroom with repulsion as Natalie smiled and bantered as if she didn't have a care in the world. She said her daughter-in-law would try to use the children to get sympathy, that she would shed tears that weren't real, and that every word coming out of Natalie Cochran's mouth had been and would remain a lie. She called her what she believed her to be, an evil, narcissistic sociopath who had intentionally, knowingly, and with premeditation stolen the life of her son, Michael Brandon Cochran, at the age of 38. That was Donna's answer to every open question this case had produced. Not the jury's verdict. Not the pathologist's testimony. Donna Bolt, who had spent 6 years watching, waiting, and refusing to let it be forgotten, standing up in a Raleigh County courtroom and saying the thing out loud that everyone else had taken 2 exhumations and a murder trial to arrive at. Ed Bolt's statement was shorter. He said he missed his stepson every day. He missed the small things, the phone calls, the casual greetings, the everyday moments that only become visible when they stop arriving. He said it was the small things he cherished most. The jury went out at 3:53 in the afternoon. They were back by 5:18. No mercy. The first such recommendation against a woman in West Virginia in 34 years. The last had been in 1991. On February 25, 2025, Judge H.L. Kirkpatrick formally pronounced the sentence. Natalie Page Cochran was committed to the West Virginia State Penitentiary for the rest of her natural life, without the possibility of parole. Her attorneys immediately signaled plans to appeal. The case did not end in that courtroom. On February 21, 2025, 3 Raleigh County delegates introduced House Bill 2789 to the West Virginia legislature. They named it the Michael Brandon Cochran Act. The law addresses the single largest forensic failure of Michael's case. Under its provisions, any unconscious patient, or any patient presenting with a blood glucose level of 49 or below, must receive a C-peptide test before glucose is administered. Hospitals that fail to comply face a $10,000 fine per violation. The gap that nearly let Natalie Cochran walk free is now written into West Virginia law as something that cannot happen again. Donna and Ed Bolt attended the ceremonial signing on April 9, 2025. Michael Brandon Cochran was a husband, a father, a son, a stepson, a coach, and a friend. He had no idea what was being built around him. He went to work. He coached the kids. He made people feel, within 5 minutes of meeting him, like they had known him their whole lives. His name is now on a law. If this case stayed with you, leave the words for Michael in the comments below. This story keeps reaching the people it needs to reach because of the people who share it. And if you're new here and this is the kind of story you need to understand, subscribe. We cover these cases every week, and we don't stop until the record is straight.